So welcome everybody to ID Boxing. I'm Andy Clarke. He's Rob Tebbutt. And this is an historic occasion. I think it's fair to say that. This is the first YouTube broadcast for the new venture, masterminded and created by the gentleman on my right here. And Rob, I have to say, first of all, it is a...
That's a good start. But you were saying, Andy?
It is a great honour to be given this role. I'd imagine this is what it feels like when you're a major news anchor and you get the call to interview a head of state or a member of the royal family or something like that.
A ruthless, bloody dictator.
Yes, well, exactly. A person of great interest. That's any number of names you could bring to mind. But it's. I've had an idea of what you've been up to the last few months, and I think, people are genuinely really glad to see you back in the game, as they've described it. The team was announced today, all very familiar faces. I know it's been a lot of hard work, and people will have the opportunity. Get in the comments and fire your questions into Rob. I will be editing them, so they will stay on the safe side of the boundary. No unkind references to our personal appearances either, because somebody on Twitter has already remarked that on that holding slate that I look like a burned sausage, which I thought was incredibly unfair. But that's the game we're in, isn't it? I suppose you have to have thick skin. But just tell us what has been going on the last few months. The last few days have involved not very much sleep and lots of caffeine. But how has this all come about?
First of all, thanks very much for coming down, Andy. We've worked together for a number of years. Always a pleasure to sit down and chop it up with you, whether or not it's on camera or on the phone or whatever. It's always great to speak to you. So thanks very much for coming down. There was a reason that I chose you and not Barry Jones, because he would have gone for deliberately the worst questions and worst comments. So we've got you here as a kind of a voice of reason, I suppose.
Yeah, but he definitely would have. You made a good choice.
Obviously, I left Boxing Social at the start of the year. It was quite sudden for some people. Obviously, there were certain things that were going on behind the scenes for a little while. I have taken a little bit of time out. I was able to spend a little bit of time with my young daughter, who's turning 5 at the end of August. So that was really good. She's just finished her first year at school, which makes me feel really, really old. And it was kind of like me working full-time in boxing kind of coincided with her being born, really. So I didn't really get an awful lot of time with my daughter over the last 4 or 5 years. So having that little bit of time to kind of take stock of things and kind of evaluate what I wanted to do. And obviously, I think I remember saying to you, I was kind of not offended, but when people were saying to me, "Oh, are you going to stay in boxing? What are you going to do?" We've had this conversation. Once you work in boxing, whether you're a trainer, fighter, promoter, media, or whatever, you get bit by that bug and you never want to do anything else. So
it's addictive.
It really is.
It's completely addictive.
It really is. And I've just kind of waited for the right opportunity. I had, some very generous offers from people. I had a very generous offer to stay with Boxing Social, but it wasn't, necessarily the right thing for myself at the time. We've kind of taken our time with things, and I feel really happy with what we've done. I mean, the last 6 months being out of the sport's not been massively easy at times, particularly around like big events like Fury White. Was kind of looking at it from a distance as real like fear of missing out with that. But everything for a reason, as our friend George Groves likes to say, and it's good to be back now. You've mentioned the kind of the guys that we've brought in, familiar faces, of course, Ryan Elliott over there, former Boxing Social, as well as Andy Purwell and Jordan Pollock. We've brought in tech grandmaster wizard Ben Faruqi, who anybody in boxing, I mean, he's worked in and around the sport for a number of years, knows about Ben. He's one of the best guys, first and foremost. You want to work with good people no matter what you're doing. But he's also, I kind of call him the Swiss Army knife, the ID Boxing Swiss Army knife. He can do anything. He can do interviews, digital. He's a tech wizard. And then we've also brought in young Harry Payne, who's our designer extraordinaire. Me and him have been pulling some real late nights over the last few days in particular and getting ready. And look, I don't know if it's the 15 cups of coffee I've had today or I am just genuinely excited, but I'm raring to go, and it's really, really good to be back. And even more so to be back and speaking to you, Andy.
Well, very kind, very kind. A lot of people have been asking me actually what you're doing, like I'm your kind of agent or something. So it'll be great to, like you say, it is frustrating when you're in a position where you're not really doing what you want to be doing, and you know that there are plans afoot, and you kind of want to tell people, but you can't tell people, and you want everything to move quicker than it actually is, because nothing ever moves as quickly as you really want it to. That's just the way of the world, isn't it? And we've got quite a lot of questions already, actually. So I think if we just get into them, because I did ask for them, so it would be pointless if I didn't then ask them. Okay, so first one, quite general, from Jacob Kilbride. What are the content plans for the channel? And James Hickson, similar kind of vein, what will you do to separate yourself from the competition?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There's so many outlets out there. Some, do some brilliant work, and, all of the kind of the recognized channels, IFL TV, Seconds Out, people like that over the years. Boxing King Media doing some really good work as well. They're people who I've known for years and years. There's no animosity. I mean, obviously there's kind of the, everybody wants their channel to be better and do well, not necessarily at the expense of others, but you'd be lying if you didn't say that you wanted to do better. So that's obviously what we want to do. With regards to the content, I think people are going to see very quickly that what we're going to be doing is very different to what we did in the past at Boxing Social. I felt like we did some great stuff at Boxing Social, and I feel like we delivered some really good content, and I was very happy and proud. But that's kind of my overriding feeling of leaving Boxing Social. It is not bitterness or anger or anything like that. I'm very proud of what we were able to achieve. But what we're going to do here is on a completely different level. We've got some stuff coming this evening. Don't want to ruin the surprise, but keep your eyes locked in on ID Boxing's YouTube channel and across socials for the type of content we'll be delivering. We have a couple of exclusive interviews, and we have a really, really cool feature, which I think might be the best bit of content that I've ever been involved with. So shout out to the ID Boxing team, Will Hartley, great videographer and editor who helped us put that together. So yeah, I mean, I want to keep the values that we were kind of known for at Boxing Social, which is, for me, and I know you're the same, that kind of impartial, independent reporting, calling a spade, being able to kind of cover the sport, look, respectfully, but also give your opinion in a respectful way whereby you can discuss the sport. And if a fighter has a bad performance, you can call it as such. And conversely, if they have a great performance, then you can do the same thing. So it will be... I don't want to ruin the surprise, but I think when people see the content that we've got coming today, get the notifications on ID Boxing YouTube channel, I think people will see very quickly the level of the type of content we're looking to produce.
In terms of the team, people are asking about the team that you've assembled. A lot of them are very familiar. They're all familiar, actually, but familiar from when you were all working together at Boxing Social. But somebody picking out here in particular, and you mentioned him, Ben Faruqi. How did that come about? O. Smith wants to know, how did that move come about to appoint him? I
mean, listen, as I mentioned there, Ben is somebody who's been around the boxing beat for a long, long time. He's worked with Amir Khan years ago. He's very close with Josh Warrington. He had his own channel, Boxing News TV, which we have since bought. I mean, I know people have asked about how have you got all of these subscribers, and obviously our social platforms, I think we've got like 18,500 on Instagram, Facebook, we've got 40,000 and so on and so forth. Check them out and follow, please. But obviously Ben coming into the fold of what we're doing meant he couldn't keep Boxing News TV. So it kind of worked for both of us. We were able to buy Boxing News TV. So it wasn't just going to sit there and gather dust for him. And we'd also have a platform to launch this on. Building platforms is not an easy thing to do. So having a ready-made one, and also kind of being able to take that off of Ben's hands has obviously worked out very well. But I mean, I've known Ben for a long time, since I first started working in the sport. I mean, he's, as I said before anything else, a really, really good guy. He's selfless. He's a team player. He's somebody who's, always going to go that extra mile. He's very, 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 I mean, he says it, so I'll say he's very OCD when it comes to quality of content. He is, he's a perfectionist. I love that. I have to kind of dial it in a little bit because, we were in a time-sensitive business and whatnot. But Ben's somebody who, in particular during the pandemic, when it was really bad and we were in like full lockdowns and stuff, I had some family issues at the time. My father-in-law, who's now passed away, was very ill. Ben was somebody who checked in with me an awful lot. I mean, we kind of went from friendly colleagues to very much friends. And he was somebody who his skill set more than anything. I mean, obviously being a great guy is one thing, but you have to be able to do the job. You can't just bring somebody in because he's your mate. And he's brilliant, like with regards to SEO for websites, tech for filming, editing, his digital knowledge. He is he is, in my opinion, a missing piece of the puzzle that we didn't necessarily have at Boxing Social, and somebody who I've always wanted to find something to do. And here we are. And I think he'll be a massive, massive asset to us.
No, it's a strong team. It is. I mean, I knew a little while ago that was kind of in the offing. And actually, I think the day that the resignations were announced was the same day that it was around the same time as Boris Johnson's downfall, wasn't it?
It was on the same day,
on the same day. So it was a big news day, and it went a little bit under the radar because of what was going on in Downing Street. But I think plenty of people in boxing still paid attention. Okay, so there are lots of questions coming in here. This is quite an interesting one from Mr. RJ. Any plans to cover MMA as well as boxing?
Absolutely not. I am not an MMA fan. I'm not going to profess to be an MMA fan. It's not something that, I mean, we have ID Boxing, which is going to be part of ID Sports Media, which is our main company, I suppose. We will be venturing into other sports. I won't be venturing into MMA. I'm not an MMA fan. I've been quite vocal. I do like to wind up MMA fans and UFC fans when I get the chance. So I think it would be somewhat hypocritical if all of a sudden I was kind of ringside and trying to interview Paddy Pimblett and what have you. Never say never, but it's not something that I'm going to be interested in doing. There may be an ID MMA in the future. Certainly wouldn't rule that out, but it wouldn't be kind of led by me, so to speak. I'd be very much on kind of the strategy side of things and how to build it out from there. But for me personally, no, I'm not an MMA guy, as people who are familiar with me on Twitter will attest to.
No, fair enough. So this is a good one from a pal of ours from Twitter. I've never actually met him, but I enjoy chatting to him every now and again. Babajide Sultande
Babs. Shout out Babs.
Babs. If you could go back in time and knowing the amount of stress-induced weight gain incurred, he doesn't get straight to the point there, would you still pursue this industry full-time or go down another route like acting, which was your previous profession?
I mean, for give a bit of context for people there, I went to drama school about 10 years ago. Obviously a very difficult industry to kind of break into. Always been a big boxing fan since my youth. And rather than kind of hunting down auditions in my early 20s, kind of spent the time talking about boxing and watching old fights, which is probably not the best way of going about things. But to answer his original question, no. I mean, I've sacrificed my physical beauty. Andy, we were talking about this beforehand. I was so handsome back in the day, but unfortunately now,
it's true.
Yeah, it is very true. But unfortunately now, not so much. But no, look, these are part and parcel of being busy, getting older. I love my job. I would never ever want to do anything else. I'm very fortunate. I used to kind of get indignant really when people used to say, "Oh, you're very lucky to do what you used to do," and I used to kind of stick my chest out. I'm not lucky. I work really hard. Everybody works hard. And not everybody gets the opportunity to do what I and you and other people do. So I am very fortunate. And I think the last couple of years of the pandemic has really made me realize that, like not being able to go to events. I remember sort of being in Vegas for Wilder Fury 2, and it was like the 5th time I'd been to Vegas in like 7 months or something. I remember looking around going, oh, I'm sick of this place. Like, I just want to go home, and I'm sick of Vegas. Like, who the fuck am I? Like, what am I doing? Like, and that was the last time I went, like 2.5 years later. So yeah, I mean, I'm at peace with the weight gain and the lack of chiseled features that I once enjoyed. I've kind of gone out there. I said to you today, usually I'm always wearing black. I'm kind of rocking the white and the big belly. It's all there for everybody to see. It's a small sacrifice to make for the job that I do. The biggest sacrifice, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is time with the family. Spending time with my daughter Lara, my beautiful fiance Kelly. Missing out with them is the hardest part of it, but look, everyone likes eating. Have a few giant pizzas here and there and get on with it.
So a few people asking here, how do they go about applying to join the team or do internships or that kind of thing?
Good question. I will tweet out Andy Clarke's phone number later. If you have any inquiries, you can send them straight to Andy Clarke. No, but on a serious note, yeah, I mean, we're always looking to add to the team. Today, with the announcement, we had a lot of people DMing and kind of various different levels of kind of experience and interest in the sport. We're looking to grow fast. I mean, I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat that. I'm not here to take part, as they say. Probably not that, but anyway. So yeah, we're always looking at ways to add to the team. Internships, I try and do what I can for people who DM and, ask about. I quite often get people like, how do you build a YouTube channel? How do you build a platform? Like, I'm a second year at uni. Can you help me with my dissertation? Things like that. And I always kind of try and get back to as many people as possible and just tell them, look, I mean, when I started in boxing, I'm sure it was very similar for yourself. And I know it was for Ryan, who's just sat over there. I had to work for probably 18 months, 2 years or so, where it was costing me money to work. And I do feel like kind of I'm not an old man, but like in the modern kind of immediate nature of things, people are desperate to kind of get straight into things and go straight into like a good job, which obviously there's nothing wrong with that, but you do have to earn those stripes. You do have to get out there, get rejected, make loads of mistakes, fuck up some interviews and what have you, and kind of learn from the whole process. So yeah, I mean, I guess in a short way of answering that question, we are interested. contact@idboxingnews.com. You can send in your CVs. I'll get Ryan just over there to go through them. There you go, mate. But yeah, no, we're always looking to add to the team, and there's a lot of good, talented people out there. So yeah, get in touch.
People asking about different kinds of content, basically, and podcasts. Barry Jones, his name is mentioned a few times here. Watch-alongs, but also digital print content, like you did at Boxing Social, where you made a great move there, I thought, because you basically scooped up the Boxing Monthly guys, didn't you, and found them a new home. So what about all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of tackle the print and the written word bit first. I mean, I love the written word. I understand that I work in kind of video and podcasts and social and things like that, where editorial is not always a main focus, but I believe that you should have it. And there's a lot of very, very talented writers who have been around the sport for decades. I mean, in Graham Houston's case, who's just turned 80 years old, he's a Hall of Fame writer. He's forgotten more about boxing than I will probably ever learn in my life. So having people like him, just also for me, kind of still being relatively young, I mean, I don't look it, but still relatively young, learning from people like him, from Mark Butcher, from Sean Brown, Terry Dooley, people like you. Yeah, you always learn a few things.
I love Dooley on Twitter.
The amount of calls that I've had about Terry Dooley and his tweets and his articles in my time, won't name any names, but there's been more than one, should we say. But yeah, it is something that we'll be doing at ID Boxing. We will be setting up, I mean, again, Ben, the Swiss Army knife, we'll be setting up the website, working on SEO, and yeah, building a website out there and kind of becoming a multifaceted media company, which is what we were at Boxing Social, having podcasts, features. Obviously, your talking head interviews, the interviews that you do in Fight Week is very important, but also having the editorial, having columns. Like some of my favorite content that we had at Boxing Social, was Russ Amber. We had like Amber's Corner. You get like a little column from Russ Amber, who's with Lomachenko, Usyk, all of these great fighters from every region that you could possibly think of. And having those little bits, for me as a boxing fan, is what I enjoy. So I always try and, I love The Wire. I don't kind of put The Wire on ID Boxing or previously at Boxing Social. But I still want to work with content that I like to consume and that I think is very good. And the editorial definitely fits into that. Podcast, videos, features. The podcast will be back. You'll all be happy to hear. We are still kind of sorting things out with that. There's been a bit of a rush over the last couple of weeks to get everything finalized. Obviously, we're there now, so we can start looking at things like that. But again, kind of to touch on what we've got coming this week, have a look at the features, have a look at some of the stuff that we're producing. It is very much just the start of things. We've got some really, really cool stuff that's planned for the next month or so, the next 6 weeks. But we've got some great stuff that's locked and ready to go tonight, tomorrow, the rest of the week. So yeah, I think everybody will get their fix of all the different bits and pieces that we've done in the past. And I'm sure there'll be a little bit of Barry Jones for everybody, but we'll have to wait and see. If he keeps calling me fat on Twitter, maybe not.
Okay, so this is my question basically. I've always been curious about this, and I've never really asked you what's the camaraderie like between, well, just within the boxing YouTube world, really? Because in my side of it, in the old school broadcast, if you want to describe it as that, it's good. People have this idea that if you work for Sky, DAZN, BT, you're all letting down each other's tyres and sabotaging each other's kit. But it's not like that at all. We all know each other. We're all friends. And we all want, I would say it's a situation where you want everyone's figures to be good. but wherever you're working to be the best. You know, how is it in YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to a degree, I guess. I mean, I've had a few publicized kind of spats with some people that I've worked with in the past. Kind of is what it is. The game is the game.
Yeah,
so
that comes with the territory.
That happens. But I mean, Coogan's a good example of somebody who, look, I've said this to Coogan, I've mentioned it on various podcasts we've done in the past, where I remember being kind of in my early 20s and doing the dishes and watching Coogan and James Helder on IFL TV, and, you know, kind of the early stages. Coogan still is now, to a degree, somebody who I kind of look up to and respect as somebody who's done the job that kind of I've got into over a long period of time and been very, very successful. When we've gone and traveled together, sometimes you're away 2 weeks at a time. You're in Vegas 1 week, New York the next, or you're in Sheffield 1 week and bloody Bournemouth the next, or vice versa for the next couple of weeks. And you eat 3 meals a day with each other, and you travel together, and you meet people at the airport and stuff like that. You're like,
there's no escape, is there?
No, there isn't. And like that's why, like, bad blood and stuff, it doesn't really pay to kind of have that. I mean, as I said, I've had my kind of spats and fallouts with people. I don't regret those things, but, you know, if you can avoid them, then they are best to avoid. If you can't, then, you know, you have to be kind of happy with what you've done, or comfortable with what you've done, I guess, which I have been. But yeah, I mean, as I said, I mean, seconds out, Danny Flexen, somebody who, you know, he's been involved in the sport for many, many years, worked at Boxing News. He's a massive boxing nut, and I really like that. I really respect that about him. You can speak to Danny almost about any fight from any era, and he'll always have an answer and have a conversation. He works tremendously hard. Same for Coogan and the guys at IFL. You know, it's not easy to do all of that stuff. People will always say, like, oh, why are you complaining? It's a great job. And it is a brilliant job. And there's no way you would complain to the point of, oh, I wish I was doing something else. Like, there's not coal miners looking at us going, oh, look at those poor guys going to Vegas and New York. But it is still draining. It is still tiring. When you're away, you miss your family. And it's just like any job, really, where you resonate with other people who are going through similar things to you, being away, dealing with time difference, and kind of working yourself pretty hard in these fight weeks. So, yeah, I mean, myself and Coogan probably, for me, is my main example of somebody I've traveled with over the years, and somebody I've had, you know, some great nights with, just covering the sport and just being around these big events together. So, yeah, I'd probably say it's not quite as, or it has the potential to be a little bit more volatile than the broadcast world and the kind of quote unquote slightly more professional side of covering the sport. But generally speaking, I think everybody kind of gets on. But of course, you want your channel to be the best, and you want to outperform people, but not in a sense of I want you to do badly. I just want to do better.
No, I think it's I think everybody seems to rub along pretty well, actually, given the nature of it is that you're all in competition with each other, kind of on an equal footing all the time. Whereas in what I do, it's different, because if you're working for Sky on a big fight and they own the rights, then they just get what they get. And it's the same thing. So there will be a kind of pecking order there, and you'll be sorted out, and you don't really have to mooch about and keep your eye on the door and keep your eye on that door and who's coming in where. It reminds me a bit of when I used to see paparazzi photographers around England football, for example. They're all in competition with each other all the time, and so inevitably sometimes.
Yeah, you have your moments.
There could be moments.
But there's definitely been occasions, and I've been that person as well on the other side of things, where you'll all be sitting down and then somebody will look at their phone and kind of, and then you look at them and you go, "Where are you going, mate?" And, "Oh, I'm going to go to my room." Interview. What? So like there are those moments when you kind of have to throw the old diversionary tactic and all of that business. But that's just part and parcel of it. I think generally speaking, everybody gets on pretty well. So yeah, I would say that generally speaking, we're all good.
A few people asking about the immediate schedule. So what's the plans for attendance at events over the next few
I will
weeks?
be invading Bournemouth. I will be invading Bournemouth, a 3-man army of myself, Andy Purrawell, shout out Andy Purrawell, and Ben Faruqi, as I've mentioned. I will be going to Sheffield next week for the Matchroom show there. Very much looking forward to that. Always like to go to watch the boxing at Sheffield. I mean, I'm really looking forward to Bournemouth, because we don't get to go down to Bournemouth, sunny old Bournemouth in the summer. It's great. Like, there's just going to be a really good week. Some really good talent on the undercard, and the main event, I think, is a very good fight between guys who I've known very well over the years in Chris Billam-Smith and Isaac Chamberlain. But also, like, I kind of touched on it there with the pandemic. Like, I made some jokes about it on Twitter a few times. Like, I kind of became Andy's PA for a little bit, where I was kind of booking his flights and booking his hotels and staying up with him until 4 or 5 in the morning.
Well, somebody asking here actually, when is Andy's world tour?
Andy's world tour, it will be back. It will definitely be back. But yeah, kind of on the shows front, I'm looking to do as many as possible. I'm looking to be out at shows. Myself and Andy, kind of the lead reporters of ID Boxing, and they're going to be, you know, a lot of shows. I mean, we're in this kind of like period where there's not as many shows, but we're kind of coming to that. I know it's not so much anymore. Certainly August, you've got Joshua, you've got that Sheffield show that I just mentioned. You've got Jake Paul. Shout out Jake Paul every time. You got KSI, shout him out as well. So yeah, there's going to be a lot. I won't be doing those events because it's not really my thing. I've never done them. I don't have a problem with them. I think people kind of, the example I always have is I have a problem with an amateur who's had 250 fights fighting a guy who's 2 weight classes below him on 3 days notice and beating the piss out of him. They're the problems that I have. Don't really have any problem with a couple of YouTubers not really going to be able to hurt each other anyway, really. But yeah, we'll be at a lot of shows. I'll be going to as many as possible. I still can't travel at the minute, unfortunately. Obviously, I had a kind of well-publicized health issue last year where I had a collapsed lung. I've not had my second vaccine because of that, but it's something that I am kind of looking into. I was looking into it and then obviously left Boxing Social, so there wasn't necessarily the demand for it there. Which has obviously led to me not being able to go to America. But that's something I'm looking to sort out soon because I think there's going to be some big fights towards the end of the year that I would very much like to be at. So yeah, myself, Andy in particular, will be at a lot of shows. We'll be, you know, banging the drum. We're a startup company. So we're going to have to try and get that message out there. And you know me, Andy, I got a big mouth. So getting out there and shouting it from the rooftops is going to be high on the list of priorities.
Well, somebody asking here actually, where's it gone? Basically along the lines of, from Alex W, will you endeavour to ask the tough questions?
Absolutely.
Something you've always done, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, having that impartiality and trying to stay on the middle. And you know as well as I do, particularly in the media, you get people who want to do you a favor and want to do this and want to do that. But, you know, just when it comes to this, you have to do this and that. And I think we've been very strong and resolute in the past over the last probably 4 or 5 years where we've tried to stay as in the middle as possible and you know, not play favorites. And, you know, people will always say the example is always Eddie Hearn, of course, and Frank Warren. They're 2 different men from different generations. It's kind of horses for courses. You approach Eddie in a different way than what you do with Frank. But generally speaking, I feel that we've kind of always trod the right line with regards to asking questions. And generally speaking, and you'll know this, as long as you're respectful and you're not going there to try and make somebody look stupid and the intent is clearly not, I'm here to put it on you sort of thing, then generally speaking, people are okay. Like, you don't really get an awful lot of blowback if you approach things properly. I feel like that's something that I've sort of managed to do quite well, and Andy as well. Being able to ask those pertinent questions and those questions that can be somewhat uncomfortable to whoever you're interviewing, whether it's a promoter, a fighter or whoever, but also, you know, having a relationship whereby you can ask those things and not have them jump down your throat or whatever. So yeah, very much so. I mean, I'm not looking to change anything that we've done in the past with regards to impartiality and asking the questions that the fans and everybody else want to hear the answers to.
Yeah, I think what you've always done well is managed to ask potentially tough questions in a non-confrontational way. I think it's perfectly possible to do that, to be honest without sounding like you're all over somebody. Some people go down the route of their thing is that they speak the truth, and it can come off quite aggressive sometimes, and that I don't think that works. Yeah, I don't think that works because, like you say, people will get on the back foot quite quickly and just think, "Whoa, hang on a second, I wasn't really expecting this." But it is perfectly possible to ask somebody things that they're not necessarily that comfortable answering, but they find themselves doing it because of the way you've asked them.
Yeah, and look, there's been times where I've watched interviews back or kind of revisited them and thought, yeah, I mean, I maybe should have done this or maybe shouldn't have done that. I've had a couple of interviews where I feel like maybe I was a little bit too combative and confrontational. But again, as long as you're not doing that every week and trying to break the door down every time you interview somebody, it's a long game. You can't do an interview with somebody. Sometimes you interview Eddie or another promoter 3-4 times in a fight week because it's just content. And particularly with Eddie and Matchroom over the last few years, he's got fighters in Uzbekistan. He's got working with Golovkin, Canelo, Chocolatito, all of it. There's only so much you can ask in one 15-minute window. So if you're going to interview him 3 or 4 times that week, I mean, you don't want him to look at you and go, oh, fuck, not him again. Like, I think probably some people do that when they see me there waiting for a camera, which is absolutely fine. But generally speaking, you have to think about kind of a long-term relationship, I suppose, but not let that impact on you when you need to ask certain questions. And don't think, oh, well, I'm not going to ask it because it's going to upset him. Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do and you have to take what comes back at you, really. And I think generally speaking, more often than not, the person that you're interviewing kind of understands that as well as you do as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair to say. It's sometimes you have to maintain relationships, don't you? And it doesn't mean that you need to be soft, but it just means that you have to do just that. You have to maintain a relationship. It's different when, say, with an issue like Saudi, for example, massive fight with Joshua, news crews will come in and they know that they're there for a day or a week and they can just ask whatever they want to ask, and it doesn't really matter if they upset people because they're off to do their next thing. It's different for us if you're working on a sport all the time. You can't just rampage around burning bridges left, right, and centre, or you'll be in trouble. There's a lot of love for your hair, by the way. So
please enjoy it while you still can, because I've got about -3 haircuts left. I said to you when we got here, I went to do my hair, and by doing my hair, I was trying to hide my receding.
A certain Kelly Scavington saying Lara wants to wave hello. She loves your hair.
Hello, Lara. Daddy's working. Love you. Hope you're well. Yeah, it's my lovely fiance Kelly, who has been really tremendously supportive throughout all of this. Like, you know me well enough to know that I think you can imagine that sometimes I'm not the easiest person to live with.
Yeah, I could picture that. Yeah. I could picture that scene.
So you throw in like a few 6 a.m. finishes and then building a company from scratch and all of that stuff. Sometimes I'm not, sometimes I'm not great to be around at times. And she's been like massively supportive from, look, I talked earlier about 10 years ago. I mean, myself and Kelly have been together for 11 years in November. We're due to be married in 18 months or so. And she's always supported me regardless of what it is. When we first met, it was, I wanted to go to drama school and kind of experience that. And then it's, you want to work in boxing, and you left boxing social. And it's always been, I've always had that support from her. And it's really important, man. Like, I speak to a lot of people in boxing, you all know this as well, who, because of the demands of the job and the nature of the business, you don't always, it's not conducive to a family life, and it's not always easy to keep those relationships healthy and happy and stuff like that. So having the support of her and my lovely daughter Lara, who just had her ears pierced, so she's very excited about that a couple of days ago, has been massive. And shout out to them.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife's great with it all as well. We met about 10, 11 years ago, so she's been with it, all the time since then. And sometimes you end up having to make, like you say, we're leaving boxing social. I've done similar things where you make quite bold decisions which seem to make all the sense in the world to you. And I kind of explain to her that this is what I'm going to do because I think it's the right thing. And sometimes she'll just kind of purse her lips and not say anything and leave the room, which is just, it's
similar to an interview.
She's not saying no.
Similar to an interview, it's when you know when not to push, like sometimes.
Yeah, that's it. So I could tell that she's maybe got some reservations about that particular course of action, but she trusts me that I'll get it right. So somebody asking here, is there a particular event or story in the sport you feel sad about missing out on in the time that you've been on the sidelines, I guess? Yeah,
I mean, I mentioned Fury White. I followed Fury around America for that period of when he was boxing. I mean, he boxed Wilder, then he boxed Tom Schwartz, he boxed Otto Wallin, he boxed Wilder again. I was at all of those fights. First Wilder fight being in LA, which is still, to me, my favourite fight week. Kind of like, it didn't have the I felt like Wilder Fury 2 was quite a corporate event. You had like Fox and ESPN and a dual broadcast and stuff. So you had more of the suits involved. Whereas the first one was just mental. You had like Queensberry, like Showtime and Tom Brown. And you had like Shane Fury running down the thing, trying to hit people with his crutch and stuff. It was like the Wild West. So that was like one of my favorite ones. But being like following Fury to these parts of the world, I don't have a relationship with him in a sense of kind of, I don't have his phone number or to speak to him or anything like that. But, you know, doing all of that, and then likewise with Dillian Whyte, covering his career when he's, you know, he's fought some really good guys, but there's been some fights where you've worked that have not been major events for him. And when they come together, I'm sat at home on the sofa with a giant pizza. That was quite difficult. I think during the period of time where I was away, there was that. And then a few weeks ago, the Joshua Usyk press conference, because I know we've spoken in the past. There was another deal that I was working on with another company, which would have been a great deal to do. And just kind of the way that things fell, it didn't quite work out. Like, no hard feelings, of course. But I wasn't planning on being out of the sport until the end of July. I mean, I was looking at, you know, Fury White was going to be the launch of my new project. And obviously it kind of went on, and for good reason. You know, everything for a reason again. But that was difficult. Missing out on Fury White. How many, you know, all British world heavyweight title fights are there going to be at Wembley Stadium? 90,000 people and what have you. And then missing Joshua Usyk press conference. Again, it was kind of another big event where I'd had people messaging me going, "Oh, are you going to be there?" And Alex Krasiuk, somebody I know that you know very well as well. He is one of my favorite people in the sport, and, you know, missing the opportunity to kind of cover that press conference was, again, kind of a little timely reminder of, hello, mate, you're sat at home, you're not actually working at the minute. So, I drowned my sorrows in pizza and tweets, and then kind of got on with it. So, yeah, I think those are probably the ones that they stung a bit, missing out on those. Yeah.
So I've got one here from Derek Jablonski, who's very determined that I ask you about the Turning Pint.
Turning Pint. So Turning Pint is on Twitter. He's one of our Irish Twitter brethren. Interesting guy, fascinating guy. Loves a bet, loves a drink. Good man. Yeah, I get on fine with him. Not sure if there's a question in there. I was just asking about
how has he helped you succeed?
He's basically responsible for all of my success in my entire life, outside of boxing, I think. But no, I mean, he's somebody who's been, as I say, he's great on the Twitter spaces. I love a Twitter space, as you know, Andy. And just chopping it up with people who are obsessed with boxing, like I am, like you are, like he is, and all of the other kind of reprobates who are on there until the early hours of the morning. Pretty much we were there last night until 1 o'clock, I think. I attribute all of my success to Turning Pint. Shout out Turning Pint. I think it's Defined Politic with a K on Twitter. Give him a follow. He's a good follow. But yeah, all praise to him.
Okay, so this is an interesting one from Cornell XX1, because it kind of taps into the ethics, I guess, of what we're all up to, and it refers to the Ben Shalom clip that was leaked. I don't really know who put that out there, whether it was the people who were actually conducting the interview or whether it was just somebody else, a bystander who was kind of in the background. But there was quite a lot of chat about that at the time, about, you know, that did seem to be quite poor form. I mean, what was your view of the whole thing, of it being released, but also of Ben outlining a few things that he didn't want to talk about? I didn't think that was unusual. I would have thought that happens quite a lot.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I say quite a lot. It does happen, obviously, you know, and you all know it as well. You sit down with somebody, like, my general rule of thumb with interviews is, if something's tied up in court or something's particularly sensitive, I will always lobby to ask the question and, like, you know, just no comment it. Like, it's much easier if you no comment something than me completely not asking it. So it's not uncommon for things like that to happen. I don't think it happens as often as some people will kind of make out. You know, everybody loves a conspiracy theory, and that was, like, you know, a big example of something that kind of blew up for a day. But look, I mean, I know Ben. I mean, I don't know him massively well, but I think he's doing great things with boxing over at Boxer. It seems like a really nice young man, which, as you know, is not always the kind of, it's not always the required skill set for boxing to be a nice young man, but he seems like a very nice young man. I actually had breakfast with him the morning that happened. So yeah, I mean, it's something that does happen in the sport. That he didn't want to talk about things that aren't related to what he's doing. I mean, that's kind of his his prerogative, of course. He wants to talk about what's on Sky, what's on Boxer. At the minute, obviously, the Probellum stuff between Boxer/Ben Shalom and Probellum with, I think, the litigation or the lawsuit had been the week prior to that. There was all of the stuff about the AJ to Sky or AJ to DAZN and stuff. So I think, yeah, it's not uncommon to see things like that or to have things like that go on in the sport. But I don't think it necessarily happens as much as some people would like to think.
No, I mean, I kind of agree with you, actually. Like, when I used to do a lot of interviewing in football, and sometimes you would get told there, we're not talking about this, or this. That was pretty common. And the point I would always make to the press officer was, what's wrong with me just asking them and them saying that they don't want to talk about it on the record, because then my guys know that I did ask. And it's important for me it's important that they know that I've done what I'm supposed to do, because otherwise I could have just bottled out and then gone back to the office and said that I was told not to ask about it.
Yeah, that's what I say. I'll always lobby to ask the question. I've had some in the past where I have drawn the line with people and said, look, if we can't talk about the main thing that everybody's talking about, let's not do the interview.
Yeah,
and
what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly. And I've lost interviews. I've kind of, I wouldn't say lost relationships, but certainly damaged relationships or kind of affected relationships with the way that I've approached certain interviews with stuff like that. Sometimes I've been asked to do some really kind of minor things that don't matter. And it just comes, sometimes people, and it's not always, but sometimes people just want to do it to kind of let you know, listen, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm in charge here, not you. And if that's the case, I'd rather not do the interview. And particularly if there's something that everybody is talking about and I do the interview and I don't ask about it, it's me who's the person who everybody's going to be in the comments calling a dickhead. It's not you. Yeah. So like that's all very well and good. I guess the flip side to that is people don't want to be seen to not want to talk about it. Like when somebody says, "Oh, let's talk about Anthony Joshua," and so I don't want to talk about Anthony Joshua. People then will be calling them a dickhead maybe in the comments. Don't call people dickheads. Just like, subscribe, turn the notifications on. But yeah, it does happen. And again, kind of goes back to what we were talking about with relationships. And, it's all very well and good people saying, "Oh, I'd ask it anyway." Yeah, okay. It's very easy to say that without, sitting there with somebody, a press officer breathing down your neck and, you're aware. Like, there have been times where I've been threatened, I don't know if it's happened with you, but threatened with legals for various things over the years. Again, part and parcel of doing news. And sometimes you'll break a story that has sensitive information, sometimes not always perfectly accurate, although obviously you always endeavor to do so. So yeah, you have to kind of take the rough with the smooth. If you're going to go in and you're going to ignore it, then you have to be prepared to face the consequences, which, there have been times where I've kind of shot out and done things that maybe in hindsight I'd look back and gone, yeah, maybe I'd have gone about that differently. But it kind of goes back to what we were saying about learning from your mistakes, getting out there, being in these uncomfortable, horrible situations sometimes that you have to learn and develop from. Now I'm quite open and upfront with people who I'm dealing with. Whereas when I first started in like full time in boxing, sort of 5-6 years ago, probably was a little bit more, greener for a start, not having that experience, and just a little bit more receptive to people kind of not telling me what to do, but leading me as opposed to the other way around. And, it goes back to what somebody said about asking the questions that matter and asking the impartial, being impartial. Haven't worked all of these years being impartial and not taking kind of the easy route with some things, because, sometimes people will make things very easy for you if you do a certain thing that maybe you're not happy with. Didn't do that over the years to get to the point now where, we're launching ID Boxing. We did very well at Boxing Social to then sell out, because otherwise, what did you do the last 4 or 5 years for? You could have made your life infinitely easier if you're just willing to bend over on day one, as opposed to kind of holding off and then going, I tell you what, we'll just do it now then, because what's the point in doing all of that stuff and having that struggle before?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you find, or have you had, you don't need to name organisations, problems with access off the back of things that you've said or done? Are some places easier than others? I find boxing generally is, some people can take things personally and hold on to them. Others are better at saying, okay, I didn't really like that very much, so I'm not going to talk to you for 2 days and then it's over and forgotten and it's behind us.
I've never been banned from anything. I've never been banned from a show. I've never been banned from an event or anything like that. But I mean, relationships have become a little bit frostier. So I mean, we all know I'm kind of, fast Twitter fingers sometimes. Sometimes I'll tweet things that people don't necessarily like. I always try and, sometimes the way that I word certain things maybe can be somewhat inflammatory, or, people don't always like it. But generally speaking, it's either what I think or kind of an extension of what I think and kind of hammed up for dramatic effect, I guess, get them likes in and retweets. But yeah, I've never been blacklisted, banned, or whatever you want to call it. There have been times where I've kind of taken myself out of certain situations if I feel like the relationship again is not, it's not going well, or you've done something that you've upset somebody, then maybe we send Andy, or maybe we send this, and but generally speaking, time is a healer in boxing. Everybody, because we are a niche sport, and I know everybody loves to forget that and think that we're a massive, massive sport. We're not. Everybody kind of needs to work together. Everybody needs, a platform to push their fighters, to push their shows. We need to interview fighters. So again, it comes down to a point where you have to, is the juice worth the squeeze? In some instances.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a message back here from Ben Faruqi. I can only assume it is the man himself. He says he's overwhelmed by Rob's praise, but forgot to mention how good looking he is. Rob forgot to mention how good looking he is. Ben, come on.
Mate, he's 10 years further down the line.
You're pushing your luck here.
To be fair, I think he's 40, or he's just turned 40. He's coming up 40. We'll say he's 39. I think he's 40. But yeah, he's all right. He's not bad. I will certainly look in a far worse state when I get to Ben's age. That's for sure. He's the evergreen one out of me and him. But yeah, no, shout out Ben Faruqi, doing great things, and thanks very much for letting me buy your platforms, mate. Because we're moving. But yeah, big him up.
Oh, somebody's asked me a question here about Darren Dyer and his pro career. I won't get into that right now. Darren Dyer was one of the kind of formative amateurs I watched right back in the day when I started watching boxing. So thanks for that, because I don't get asked many of those. There's a question from the Dublins here. Will you cover issues in boxing such as Triller, things like that?
Issues in boxing with Triller?
Well, the question says, will you cover issues in boxing as Trill Boxing does in the States? Is Trill Boxing
okay.
I'm not aware of?
I'm not massively aware of Trill Boxing. I think I've seen him from Twitter and stuff. I can't say that I'm massively familiar with his work. But yeah, as we've said, I'm always... I don't like to shy away from certain topics. Obviously, certain topics are a little bit more sensitive. The interview subject doesn't always want to talk about certain things. But I'll always, again, going back to what we said, endeavour to at least ask the question or go there, and try and get to the bottom of what people are talking about. Because otherwise, excuse me, sorry, I've had so many coffees. What are we doing if we're not doing that? Like, what are we here for? If I don't work in PR, you're there to ask the questions and to try and to get interviews and ask the questions that everybody. And look, if I ever don't do that, like, you're all on YouTube now, you all follow me on Twitter. If you don't, please follow me on Twitter. Abuse me. I don't mind. Like, I will know better than anybody if I have or haven't done it. If I know in my head, I should have asked that, and I will know that, and it's absolutely fine for people to remind me, because that keeps me, keeps me honest, keeps me on my toes. I've got no problem with that. But yeah, I will always try my best to kind of cover the main issues in boxing for sure.
So in terms of not things away from boxing necessarily, but as everybody knows, you're a big fan of The Wire. How about people who are famous for other things, so from other fields, actors or whoever, but are into boxing? Are you going to look to speak to more of them, broaden things out a bit?
Stay tuned, Andy Clarke. Yeah, we will be, is the short answer to that, the easy answer to that. Boxing is, we've spoken about it. We've mentioned it on podcasts before, fighters, boxers, they are the modern day gladiators. You look around at a big fight. I mean, you go back in some of the Mayweather fights, you got The Rock there, Denzel Washington. Probably not going to get Denzel Washington to come to Hoxton, but, maybe. But generally speaking, a lot of people are interested in the sport. They are kind of the sports stars. Everybody loves to go and watch boxing. So tapping into that with musicians, with other influencers and people from other sports is something that we've always been keen to do. It's not like I couldn't do that at Boxing Social, but what we were doing at Boxing Social and what we're going to be doing at ID Boxing are very different. So I would like to think that we do something like that very soon. But yeah, I mean, I'm always keen to. I'll talk about boxing with anybody, whether it's a taxi driver, somebody who works in boxing, somebody who's a stone cold casual, or a musician or whatever. You know, I'm happy to speak to anybody. I think there's a story that I think Max Kellerman told once. He probably heard it somewhere else, but anyway, where he said, if you've got LeBron James and Michael Jordan playing one-on-one in one corner, you've got Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo one-on-one in another corner, and you've got two fellas from the pub having a fight in the other corner, where's everybody watching? People are watching the fight. Whether you like it or not, it's in our DNA to watch people fight. So let's take advantage of that. And if you're interested in boxing and you like watching people fight and you want to come and say your piece, whether you're a fan, a musician or whatever, I feel like we'll be able to offer something for people on here that isn't just, as much as I like talking to you, Andy, two boxing nerds talking about boxing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do think it's interesting when you get people from outside, because sometimes you discover people who've got a passion for the sport who you never knew, and it can surprise you sometimes just how many people are into it from different arenas. And there's a lot of admiration for boxers as well within the rest of sport, I find, particularly footballers are kind of fascinated by fighters. So there's always been that kind of room. Somebody asking here, plans for ID Boxing to stream live small hall shows?
Potentially open to anything. I mean, it's not something that we've kind of factored into our immediate business plan, but yeah, why not? I'm always happy to do stuff like that. As you know, Andy, I'm a seasoned co-commentator, having done one show.
You are absolutely right.
Done one show with you. But yeah, no, why not? I mean, we've done it in the past. I'm sure it's something that we'll look to do in the future. No immediate plans to do it now, but sure, why not?
This is a good one actually from Dowie Powell.
Dowie Powell,
Boxing Wales. Boxing Wales.
Go follow him on all platforms. Boxing Simru, Cymru. There we go. Sorry, Barry's not here to correct me. So.
Will there be a Goals on Sunday style show coming on Sunday mornings?
Well, we did, as you'll know, we did some Sunday lives in the past where we did after Usyk Joshua.
I've always thought there's a real space for that. You know, me and Macklin with Macklin's Take would do only a couple of times, maybe only once actually, after AJ Usyk in Saudi did a wrap up the next day and got it out quite quickly. And yeah, there is definitely a space for that.
We've spoken about it in the past, haven't we, with you doing something with Macklin? I've said to you in the past, like, go live as soon as you're done. As soon as the final bell goes, obviously get what you need to get done. Go live. Ring in the background, people leaving, all of that stuff. Like, as soon as that final bell goes, or as soon as the fighter, the winner is announced, or somebody's chinned or whatever, the clock is ticking. And everybody wants that content. That's why Matchroom are doing live shows after their events. Matchroom do really great stuff with Matchroom Media, with kind of the way that they get that content immediately and push it out to people. It's some of my favorite stuff that we've ever done. We did Joshua Usyk on a Sunday morning. We did Wilder Fury 3 on a Sunday morning, which was really interesting because nobody had slept. So that was a real wacky kind of post-fight live. But yeah, absolutely. I think also doing something on a Saturday and having, a Soccer AM style show or certain features that will work well on a Saturday morning. We have something on Saturday morning this week, so everybody keep your eyes peeled for ID Boxing then, for something that's a bit different and I think works well for Saturday. But yeah,
someone asking about a phone in here, is there any potential for that? I guess technologically that might be quite complicated.
No, yeah, absolutely. Working with having fans and having call-ins and having people, we did something in the past. We were working with an app called Camflare, where I would send out a Camflare to people, a link where they would be able to record on their phone, and as soon as they stopped recording, automatically would be sent into our Dropbox. And we would just do kind of 10 or 12 fans with their previews or their reactions to things. Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to do that. We're going to be doing a lot more fan engagement stuff, kind of giving away the game a little bit here, giving some secrets away. But yeah, we'll be doing a lot of fan engagement stuff and getting people from all walks of life, all levels of boxing knowledge. You don't have to know who the WBA light flyweight champ is to sit down and enjoy a boxing show. So there's something in it for everybody in our sport, whether you're into the heavyweights, you're into the YouTubers, you love the flyweights, whatever your bag is. We've got you at ID Boxing. Almost made the mistake that I was talking about before. We've got you at ID Boxing. There we go.
Yeah, I think that's the absolute key to it. I think when you see the coverage of quite a lot of sports now, the temptation is for people to try and make it all things for all people, and I think that ultimately that is almost impossible. But it's still very, very possible to appeal to people who regard themselves as hardcore fans, but also make it accessible to people who aren't. You know, I look at Sky Cricket, that's always my example. Like, you look at the guys on that, they've got all the knowledge about that sport you could ever want. But anybody can watch it because my wife watches it and she knows nothing about cricket and she still enjoys it. So you don't have to kind of end up patronising people.
That's it.
It's you know, it just doesn't work.
That's what I was going to say there. You know, you want to make it accessible to everybody without spoon feeding it to people. You don't want to, dumb it down for people, because then you alienate the hardcore boxing fan base, but then also people who are new to the sport don't want to be spoken to like children. And boxing's a unique sport as well, I think, because everyone's a cook when it comes to a fight. If you've seen people fight and you watch boxing, it's one of the more accessible things about the sport. Everybody's seen or been in a fight at some point in their life, whether it's in the playground or a pub or something. You've seen something like that happen. So again, it kind of appeals to their your kind of human nature to watch it and enjoy it. Enjoy it in certain situations, enjoy it. But yeah, having something that's accessible to everybody without alienating them, I guess, is the plan, and offering content to fit all people's interests.
So still plenty of questions coming in. They're mainly about plans for content and all those kinds of things, and you've pretty much answered those. And the proof will be in the pudding, as always. Just people need to wait and see exactly how things evolve. So maybe just one more before we wrap it up. And this is probably one that you've been asked quite a few times, but who is the dream interview for ID Boxing? Not somebody you've had before, somebody who you would like to get.
There's two names immediately that spring to mind. So one fighter, I would love to interview James Toney. He's my favourite fighter. I've had opportunities to interview him a couple of times on Zoom, and I've turned them down because I don't want it on Zoom. I want to sit down with him. I want him to look at me like he wants to kill me, be very rude to me, and do an interview there, because that's James Toney, and that's fine.
It's so much better in person.
Yeah,
I think anyone could understand why that would be, but with Zoom did take things to a different level during lockdown, and it's better than a phone call because you can see them, but it's still nothing like the same as being in front of somebody.
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
It's definitely you just have that connection. Like you can read body language and you can go for it. It's so much better to do stuff in person. James Toney is one. Kind of while we're on fighters, I offered a guy who was with Mike Tyson $1,000 when we were in Las Vegas to interview Mike Tyson. And he kind of looked at me like, this is Mike Tyson, mate, $1,000. You need to add some zeros. And I was like, I don't have any zeros, but $1,000 is all I've got. That didn't happen.
If you had cash, did you have cash?
I had cash.
Wow, I'm surprised you didn't do it,
Yeah, well, he was in, at the time, he was in the MGM Grand. They have like Pete Rose is always there signing baseballs and caps and stuff like that. He was doing that. So I'm assuming he was getting paid pretty well to do that. But yeah, so he was one. But if I had to pick one, and it's not a fighter, Al Heyman. I would love to sit down with Al Heyman and just talk to him about his, not just boxing, but his whole career in the music industry, how he sees things. I think the last registered interview with him is 1996 or something like that. I remember speaking to Shelley Finkel once, and I said to Shelley, I'm somebody who I've interviewed in the past and enjoy quite a good relationship with. What do you think the chances are? And he was just like, no chance, mate. It's just not going to happen. Al is not somebody who, I don't know him. Mr. Heyman is not somebody who does an awful lot of interviews. So yeah, just kind of sitting down with him for an hour, I think would be really, really fascinating, because nobody does it and we've not heard anything from him. And, he's been integral to so many careers over the years, not just in boxing, but in music. Drake, Al Heyman checks off of all of my events. Like he's made some serious big names, some serious money. And I would love to sit down with Al Heyman and talk a few things through with him for sure. Yeah,
I can understand why he would be top of the list, because he is in a lot of ways a man of mystery, isn't he? But a massive player in the sport, and yeah, good luck with that, because I think the chances of that are fairly small. But it's you never rule these things out, do you? For me, I would love to. It's a similar kind of thing. I Don King, but only if you can manage to get past the Don King barrier, if you like, and actually talk to him about some real stuff, about the past and what he really thinks about things. And I don't think that would ever be possible.
No,
I don't think that would ever be possible. It would be absolutely fascinating were it to be possible, but I don't. You would get the shtick, the spiel, which is enormously entertaining still, but you would just emerge from it none the wiser as to what he actually thinks about practically anything.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do something like that in Fight Week. I mean, Daniel Dubois has obviously just boxed Trevor Bryan. You see like a few bits of Don, and he's got his flags. I don't want that version of Don King.
No.
I want him in the office.
No.
Kind of, close the blinds, have yourself a drink, and let's talk about things properly. Yeah, that'd be interesting. I'd like to do something one day with Roberto Duran, but we've seen a lot of stuff from him in the past, and obviously, it gets to those guys from that era in particular. And also Tyson is kind of not from that era necessarily in that era. Duran kind of carried on boxing for many years while Mike was active, but do we need another Mike Tyson show, film, documentary? Muhammad Ali was my hero growing up. My dad and my mum hated it. They got divorced. But he had like a pencil drawing of Muhammad Ali in the living room. No kids. No, just Muhammad Ali on one side and Sugar Ray Leonard on the other side. So like Muhammad Ali for me growing up, but when he died, man, I cried for 2 days, and I happily admit it. Like I was unemployed at the time, so I didn't have much to do apart from sit around and cry. But do we need any more Ali films? Do we need any more Tyson docs? Like, again, sort of Duran, Leonard, Hagler, Hearns. Like, we've seen it, we've heard it by people who are much better than me. Like, so do we need to hear, my version of that? I want to, people, that's why Heyman is obviously the big kind of interview to get, because we've just never heard anything from him. But, yeah, doing something with like a legend who we don't hear often about. I interviewed Riddick Bowe once. That was in Wilder Fury 1 Fight Week, and that was cool because I hadn't really heard an awful lot from him in a while. And yeah, he's not ever really somebody I ever thought I would sit down and do an interview with. Riddick Bowe still wanted to fight Lennox Lewis at the time, and I think they did like this heavyweight legends event, and he like tried to fight Lennox Lewis on the stage. It was great. It was brilliant. I loved it. But yeah.
Okay. I think we've gone for an hour, which has slipped by nice and quick. So I know we've got some other things to do. So we probably better leave it there. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, let's leave it there. Thanks very much for coming in. A bit different vibe today. It's usually me kind of asking the questions, but thanks very much for coming in and giving me a grilling. Thanks to everybody who's watched, and we've had a massive outpouring of support with the announcement of ID Boxing today. I can't thank everybody enough. The last 6 months, while I've been out of the sport, it's not always been sweetness and light, and not always the easiest thing to be away from doing what I love to do, what I am addicted to doing. I am a kind of self-confessed workaholic. So just thank you to everybody who's kind of checked in. When I was in that period of time where I was advised by my lawyer to stay quiet on social media, I had a lot of people reach out to me and say some really lovely things and take an interest in what I was doing outside of boxing and stuff. And I can't thank people enough for that. And yeah, I really do feel like people are going to really enjoy what we're doing at ID Boxing. I really do truly believe that. I don't feel like anybody is going to be putting out the type of content that we're doing. If you don't think that's the case, tell me, abuse me, write down in the comments, subscribe first, but write down in the comments and tell me how, you said it was going to be this and said it was going to be that. And I promise I will deliver for you. So thanks everybody for checking in and listening to me rambling, coffee-addled maniac. And thank you to the main man, Andy Clarke, for popping down.
No problem at all. Always a pleasure. So yeah, thanks for joining up with us for your company, everybody. We will catch you again next time.
There we go.
All right. That